We have a budget over a month after it was originally due. The governor signing the final agreement this week. We'll hear from a political expert on how this will impact you. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. After more than 30 days and several budget extenders, lawmakers in Albany were able to complete a 2026 state budget.
Here's the final breakdown on it. The budget will spend $254 billion. $370 million will be spent on gun violence prevention programs. Another $50 million or so to upgrade police technology. $35 million in security enhancements at religious and vulnerable locations. $340 million will fund a free school breakfast and lunch to all K through 12 students.
As for policy, there will be increased penalties for people who wear masks while committing a crime.
Senate Minority Leader Rob Ortt reacting to the budget, saying, quote, most of the policies that held up the budget talks for more than a month represent small steps when comprehensive action was needed. Actions to address involuntary commitment, discovery reform, and the statewide mask ban could have gone further and hopefully will do so in the future. Joining us now to give additional insight on the budget, David Lombardo. He is the host of WCNY, the Capitol Press Room. If you've never listened or heard it, you got to go check it out. David, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the plug.
How late a night for you? Was it a long one?
It was a reasonable night for me, John. I've been around the block a few times, so I know that I can call it a little ahead of when the Assembly and Senate finish voting. So I left the Capitol around 8:30 on Thursday night.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, very reasonable.
Yeah, not bad at all. And I know you've covered the Capitol for years.
I'm old, yes.
So have I. What do you think is different about this year's state budget compared to other years?
I think the notable thing, at least for people in Planet Albany, so to speak, is the time at which it took to get this budget done. It's the latest budget in over a decade and a half, not as late as some of the budgets that John might remember from the battle days pre-Andrew Cuomo, and they were stretching into August, October. But the governor in this case drew a line in the sand, said she wanted 4 policies, it appears, involuntary commitment changes, changes to discovery laws, changes to how accessible smartphones would be in schools, and wouldn't budge on them. And because of that, because of the power she has to get a budget done, that's why we're talking about finishing the budget in early May.
Where did she land on that stuff? Did she get everything she wanted, or part of each thing, or how did it land?
So the governor was very successful in terms of getting language that restricts smartphones in schools. She was a little less successful on the effort to restrict masks at protests. She was very successful in getting changes to the pretrial evidence disclosure laws that she was pushing, something that dates back to reforms in 2019 that were designed to make evidence more accessible to criminal defendants. And when it comes to the expansion of involuntary commitment, basically making it easier for government officials to take someone, to have them evaluated if it seems like they can't care for themselves, meet their basic needs, she was very successful on that front too. I'd say the impact, though, of the involuntary changes and the discovery changes remains to be seen what that actually looks like moving forward, whether it's going to have a dramatic effect on the status quo or whether it's going to be kind of the same for most New Yorkers.
And I know lawmakers this year were really doubling down on the fact that there was a lot of policy in this budget. What are your thoughts on that? You know, do you think next year we could see less policy in the budget?
I don't think so. I think that this Governor Kathy Hochul, has identified the budget as her best and most effective way in getting her agenda through Albany. Yes, she has been successful in the past in trying to move standalone bills through the legislature. I think of 2024, when she was successful in getting legislation that restricts minors' access to certain social media functions. But this budget is a clear indicator that she thinks this is her best way to get her agenda through. And next year is an election year, which I guess they all seem like at this point. So I think she's going to be even more committed to getting her agenda done, and she's going to see the budget as the best way to do that.
You think polling drove any of the issues here? Because I was noticing her numbers were kind of wavering, and we're seeing polls saying, well, maybe, you know, not as many New Yorkers love her as they did, you know, a year ago. And then we suddenly see you're going to get a check in the mail for a couple $100. It's hard to separate those two. I mean, do you think that some of her popularity and wanting to win another term played a role in anything she was trying to get in this budget?
I think the state capitol is always tied to politics. I think that the government and politics are so intermeshed that nothing is done without a consideration for the other. You bring up the idea of the rebate checks. This was something that the governor laid out in late 2024 as part of her quote-unquote affordability agenda, and she was initially pitching checks worth $300 for individuals, $500 for families, wanted to commit $3 billion in state resources to this. It got into the budget, scaled back to a certain degree, but it's still going to hit the vast majority of New York filers. Whether it ends up resonating with people when they get that check that, wow, Kathy Hochul, she really went to bat for me, or it's just like, great, here's a check that's going to pay for my groceries or whatever bill. I don't think that's going to necessarily resonate with people a year from now when they're voting in a primary or voting in the general election and saying, hey, honey, hey, husband, I don't know if we should be voting for the Republican here because we did get that check last year from Kathy Hochul and those friendly Democratic state lawmakers. We'll see.
And I know you talked about this earlier, the cell phones in schools. Obviously, there's going to be bell-to-bell restrictions. What are you hearing from other lawmakers? Were they a fan of that? Were they happy that passed?
I think there was a general consensus in Albany that something needed to be done on this front. And even if you talk to education stakeholders, they all agreed, yes, we think this is an issue in our schools. We think that kids are clearly distracted. What there was not necessarily an agreement on, and what ended up holding up the budget to some degree, was who's going to be responsible for policing this. What does that restriction look like? The teachers union, which is very powerful in Albany, was pushing for this bell-to-bell restriction. Basically, you come in, your cell phone's getting checked at the door, you leave, you get your cell phone back, because they didn't want to police it. They didn't want to be the ones responsible for collecting them in each class, and they won out at the end of the day. There's going to be some wiggle room, whether it's going to be stored in a pouch, your locker. I don't know how much wiggle room that actually represents for these local school districts, but I think this ends up being one of the most impactful things in the New York State budget, given how expansive smartphones are. I don't know if you guys had them in school, but everybody seems to have them now at a younger and younger age.
Less than a minute, but Republicans aren't happy. I mean, of course, they're never happy when Democrats are in control, and that's not a shot at them. I'd be the same way if I was part of that group. They feel we're just overspending. What's the consensus there? We can afford all this?
Whether we can afford all this is a long-term question that I don't know the answer to. This year, we probably have the money, but there's a good chance that the lawmakers might have to return in the fall to address economic turmoil or federal cuts that are going to impact our revenue. So, yeah, we can afford all this right now. 6 months from now, it might be a different picture, whether we have all the cash on hand to pay for a budget that's going to be in excess of $254 billion.
All right.
Have to wait and see. Thank you so much, David Lombardo.
David Lombardo, thank you. And out of there in time to go home and watch Netflix if you wanted to last night.
Appreciate it.
Probably went home and said, I'm going to rest. All right, New York's Attorney General is joining other states and suing the federal government. When we come back, we'll talk with a legal expert on what this lawsuit hopes to accomplish and the next steps in that legal process. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. The Attorney General Letitia James, along with attorneys general from 18 other states and the District of Columbia, filing a lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's cuts to Health and Human Services Department.
James says since taking office, the administration and Secretary Robert F. Kennedy have laid off thousands of workers and dismantled agencies within HHS, making it impossible for the department to carry out vital services to the American people.
And since taking office, this administration has fired scientists, closed labs, shuttered life-saving programs without rhyme, reason, or any legal authority. Nothing but devastating consequences for millions of Americans.
Trump administration strongly disagrees with the attorney generals, saying that they're cutting out wasteful spending as part of an effort to make federal agencies more efficient and reduce overall government spending to lower the nation's debt. Joining us now to give additional insight on the lawsuit is Andrew Safranco, a Capital Region attorney with Lamar Safranco. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
I guess we shouldn't be surprised that we're seeing lawsuits against the Trump administration. There's a lot of them going on right now, right?
There are, and the states, the attorney generals who are the lead legal representative for the states are challenging a lot of the decisions that the Trump administration is taking on at this time.
Can you walk us through the lawsuit with the Health and Human Services? What is it for people that don't know?
Okay, so this new lawsuit that was filed in Rhode Island earlier this week is challenging Trump's administration in a few ways. One, that the lawsuit is a violation of the Administrative Protection Act. Two, that it's a violation of the separation of the balance of powers. And three, that it's arbitrary and capricious. And four, that it's violating essentially the due process rights of the states and cutting all of these programs without analysis and the approval of Congress and the appropriation skills of Congress.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because you do get a sense it's like a blunt instrument saying, well, Andrew, we're going to come in, just cut 30% of your staff. And you say, well, wait a second, do we want to examine who does what and why this is important, and what the next step is if we get rid of this position or this doctor or this research, the downstream effect of this? Is that what this kind of lands on?
Exactly. The states are saying that he didn't have the power to eliminate these programs or eliminate these people because like the CDC, for example, is one of the programs that was hit significantly, is funded and approved and started through an act of Congress. And the appropriation of money comes through Congress. So the states and the Congress are saying that you can't now challenge or change those rules and programs that have been enacted and paid for by Congress, and doing so without more forethought, more insight, is unconstitutional and against the Constitution, against Congress.
So what would it take for them to prove that, the administration is doing this?
That's going to be an interesting, case. So I think initially what they're trying to do is obtain an injunction, a temporary restraining order, to stop everything so there can be more additional talks. But essentially this becomes a real legal issue. Does the administration, does Secretary Kennedy, does the Trump administration have the legal authority to do these cuts and make these cuts? I guess the biggest analogy and easiest way to understand it is every time a new president is elected, the United States attorneys in each of the districts across the country, they usually get replaced. And that's somebody that can be replaced that serves at the pleasure of the president. And here, what the states and what Congress are saying, you're now cutting out programs, cutting out rules and all sorts of programs, medical health, Medicaid program, health benefits, food benefits, mental health benefits, World Trade Center benefits. Does the government itself, does the federal government itself have the ability to eliminate those without input from the states and more of the congressional stakeholders?
Do you see a lot of these cases ending up at the Supreme Court? I mean, they can't take every case, or they'd be doing nothing but Trump lawsuits. But it feels like the formula now with Democrats who are opposed to a lot of what he's doing is file lawsuits, try to maybe even, I'll use the phrase, judge shop, or find a sympathetic court that will impose the injunction. And then eventually it's going to end up, 6 months, 9 months from now in front of the Supremes, where they're going to have to sort through all this stuff. They all can't go to the Supreme Court, right?
Exactly, but it'll go first. So this case is filed in Rhode Island, which is part of the First Circuit. So it'll initially go through a district court in Rhode Island. That judge will make a determination. Whoever wins is going to appeal that first to the First Circuit, and then ultimately from there they'll ask for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States.
And how long could this take to play out? Several years, right?
So under normal legal processes and under normal cases, it would take several years to go through all of discovery. I expect that there's going to be a preliminary injunction. Whether that gets decided or granted or not, then the federal government will have a chance to either answer the complaint or make a motion to dismiss. So all of this is timely. So a normal course of process, you're probably talking 1.5 years, 2 years. On a case like this that is very legal in nature, it could be decided and asked to be expedited because it has such an impact on the states and the country.
Do you get a sense, being a lawyer, that maybe the strategy here too is to run the clock out on him, where multiple lawsuits, you can only fight so many battles at once. His lawyer's got to be busy in all these different jurisdictions, all these different challenges. Eventually we're going to be at the midterms, and then he's facing the backside of his term. So
listen, the federal government has lawyers, and the Trump administration will have lawyers that'll fight all of the cases that are brought. So I don't think just the filing a lawsuit is to try to spread their wings too too far so that they can't pay attention to all the suits. I just think that everything today is political in nature, and the states are going to sue the Trump administration if they feel that they're being hindered or things are being done unconstitutionally. And just as I think the Trump administration is going to come looking at the states if he believes that the states aren't acting properly.
Gotcha.
Do you think eventually more states will jump in on this lawsuit?
You know, it's hard to say. I would expect that most of the states that were involved would have been involved from the get-go. I'm sure that all the states' attorney generals were there. It wouldn't surprise me if a few more came in, but by looking at the states, it's becoming almost blue-red and a political issue when this really shouldn't be a political matter. This is a real legal issue. Does the administration have the authority to do what they're doing, and did they do it in a legal way?
All right. Andrew, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
The leading candidate for New York City mayor, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, looking to form a new political party. When we come back, details from Cuomo on what the Fight and Deliver party will be all about. Well, another twist in the race for New York City Mayor Andrew Cuomo, who currently leads the pack in the Democratic primary, forming a third party called the Fight and Deliver Party.
Henry Rossoff with Pix 11 breaks down what that means for the race for mayor.
Former Governor Andrew Cuomo says he wants to appeal to more New Yorkers by starting his own third party while insisting he's not turning his back on the Democratic Party. Cuomo says he'll be creating the, quote, Fight and Deliver Party. He'll give himself a second line on the November ballot if he's successful in doing this and assuming that he still gets the Democratic nomination. He said in a statement, quote, Trump didn't win, Democrats lost. Cuomo says he wants to be part of turning around the Democratic Party, but in the meantime wants to give voters a different way to support him. This is not unheard of in New York politics. The Working Families Party often gives their line to a Democratic nominee, and the Conservative Party often gives their party line to the Republican nominee. But others running in this Democratic mayoral primary are just not buying it. Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, who's running second to Cuomo in the polls, says, quote, he's scared. A spokeswoman for Scott Stringer, the former comptroller who also wants to be mayor, speculated that Cuomo is only doing this because something internal is shifting behind the scenes. Of course, Mayor Eric Adams is already planning to run as an independent following his legal troubles for re-election. He chided Cuomo, saying the former governor is once again ripping off his playbook. Now, as for the Cuomo campaign, I pressed them saying, would former Governor Cuomo still run as a third-party candidate if he doesn't get the Democratic nomination? Spokeswoman told me, quote, he's winning the Democratic primary. In the newsroom, Henry Rossoff, Pix 11 News.
At the Capitol, restaurant and small business owners gathered in Albany calling for the passage of a bill that would save them some money by getting rid of the swipe fees on sales tax and tips. When you purchase something, chances are using a credit or debit card. That business then has to pay a processing fee to the credit card company or the bank. Senator James Skoufis says that small fee is adding up quickly. He, along with Assemblyman John McDonald, sponsoring a bill that would get rid of the swipe fees on sales tax and tips. Nancy Bambara of DZ Restaurants, they operate 3 different restaurants up in Saratoga Springs. She says this bill could save her thousands of bucks.
These numbers are enormous. Last year, my interchange fees were over $300,000. Of that, almost $72,000 was just driven from sales tax and tip income.
I do think there's a chance we can take this up and pass this bill. Illinois passed it a couple of years ago, so we'd be the second state in the country.
However, Skoufis is hoping now to get the bill over the finish line before the end of the session, which is in June.
A coalition of parents, doctors, faith leaders, and lawmakers gathering at the Capitol this week, pushing 3 bills aimed at making the state's food supply safer. Sponsors of the 3 pieces of legislation saying they are addressing risks that they say the federal protections don't address. Under the Food and Safety and Chemical Disclosure Act, 3 chemicals linked to cancer and thyroid damage would be banned, while the sodium warning would require some restaurants to put warnings on menu items that have over the daily recommended limit of sodium.
The amount of sodium that is in this meal here to my left. So we're going to count these out. Let's all count them out together. Are we ready? Just give me a little count. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're gonna pause there because that was your whole daily limit right there, but we're gonna keep going. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All in one meal that is marketed as something that is very healthy.
Stick around. Back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. Finally, in Empire State Weekly, Catholics around the world celebrating the election of the new Pope. Former Cardinal Robert Prevost changing his name to Pope Leo XIV. Now, Pope Leo making history as the first American ever elected as leader of the world's 1.5 billion Catholics.
The newly elected pontiff was born in Chicago and has spent much of his life in Peru. He delivered remarks following his election, speaking in 2 languages, Italian and Spanish, though not English. He offered a message of peace and pledged to help build bridges.
We certainly will be sure to bring you any details on this impact it might have right here on New York State. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. We'll see you here next week.
Quick reminder, don't forget you can watch this show all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.